Hello humans, welcome to InCamera. As you can see, we're shooting a giant submarine today. Well, it's not a giant submarine, it's technically a miniature submarine, but it's pretty massive. This is for part of our Dry for Wet series, and this is essentially the predator sub that is hunting Pete down in our deep sea aquatic sequence. This is actually a paper build, and it looks amazing, and you've obviously done lots of weathering and stuff like that. JP hasn't really slept because it was a mission to get this done for the day. So, you know, he probably won't make any sense, but that's okay. We understand. That's the nature of the beast. James, let's talk about this monster. So, yeah, where did you start?
Well, the template came from a Papercraft website where people upload and share templates and designs to build paper models. Normally intended to print out for A4 size.
Yeah, for a domestic situation.
So I went to A1 and we ended up with a 7-foot-long paper submarine. It's reinforced with Fomex board, which is like I think it's a polystyrene-based high-density board. It's like a card.
Yeah.
Very, very nice to kind of sculpt and cut. And I use that to make some reinforcing ribs that go on the internal of the structure to help keep its shape. And the spine, if you like, that goes through the length of the sub is PVC pipe. And all that is just to help hold its shape, because paper, once it gets to this kind of size, wants to sag and bow and everything.
So you've built it in 2 parts, which is largely for transport reasons.
Yeah.
And then on that inside bit where they come together, that's where we've got the motor there for our propeller.
That's right, yes. So inside we've got a very basic speed controller for a DC motor. I ended up using a PC fan for our propeller.
I love it.
Just happens to be pretty much the correct scale and blade count and everything.
Amazing.
So that's turning away in the direction that we want at the speed that we want. Very simple 9-volt battery powering that. And that's about it for the internals. And then the external finish is some very light airbrushing just to pick out some detail and some texture and give the impression of some aged kind of metal work and leaking vents and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And all those things hopefully help build up a sense of scale, so something that will register to the camera as being bigger. Yeah.
Again, we're working on essentially a 0 budget, and that's one of the reasons we chose to go with the paper thing, as it's just a good means to build something, but allows us to demonstrate the technique of Dry for Wet, as we did with the little sub, but I mean, that was just so small.
Yeah.
And what's nice about this is we've got something larger that we can do some quite long passes with. And we're essentially going to kind of approach it in a similar way that we did with our TIE Fighters episode. So we've got a nice long track, and we will essentially move the track past the submarine. A difference being that we're going to fill the room with smoke and light, as you can see from above, and that will essentially give us a sense of being at a depth of water.
Yeah, give us a volume that will help hide the wires as well,
Yes.
but give us that depth of murky kind of deep sea-ness.
Yeah, and one joy compared to our previous Dry for Wet shoot with the tiny little sub is we've got several points of contact here for our wires. And weight.
We use strong monofilament to mount the sub to a length of plastic conduit rigged to our megaboom, which we fully extended to give us the widest frame possible for our opening shot. I double a plus green gel as I did for our mini sub shoot, so the colour stays consistent across the shots. I want this shot to be really murky, almost ghostly, to the point where we can't actually tell what it is we're seeing until that sub gets close. So I want to create a nice soft light. I start with a trace frame in front of a 1K, positioned at a decent distance. Then we test adding diffusion directly to the lamp's barn doors as well. The issue with heavily diffusing light sources is that the light becomes spread. This is a particular problem when you want your background to fall off to black. To battle this, I rig a floppy flag to the scaffold beneath the frame to block as much light from hitting our black drape as possible. When we add smoke, that will fill in the gap, and should soften our light a little further too. We set our exposure brighter than we really want the shot, knowing that we can bring it all down in post. It's better to capture that information so you've got more latitude to play with in the grade. We pump loads of smoke into the space and let it settle and start shooting takes.
Now we're talking. Now it's like, it's just a barely perceptible thing in the distance that will become clearer as we get closer to it.
We didn't have a motion control rig at this point, so we just had to rely on my best attempt at keeping the shot steady and JP's stabilisation skills in post.
Hey humans, forgive the interruption. I'm just here to remind you to like this video if you're enjoying it, to comment on it, that always helps, and share this video with your friends and enemies if you like. We just want to get the word out there. Ta-ta.
Our next shot is actually going to be comped with one of our earlier mini-sub shots. It's a low-angle shot that sees the big sub loom over the little one as it sits on the seabed. To help tie the two shots together, we used a flag to create a moving shadow over the mini-sub. So all we need now is a nice silhouetted low-angle shot of the biggie. So I rigged the head of our tripod directly to the dolly, an added benefit being that by taking the tripod out of the equation we'll get a smoother move.
Yeah, sort of trying to imagine our little guy.
I'm using the scrubbing tool here. It's really handy for seeing how smooth movement is over the course of a clip. Not all cameras have this function, but it's so handy. I'm really happy with how these two shots came together. Although scales and camera angles may be a little off, that big sub just looks so scary above the little one. And how it feels is what matters, right? Our final shot is of Pete's POV as he watches aghast as the big sub passes over him endlessly. So rather than changing the lighting, we just turn the sub around. I remove the blackout on the floor so our key light bounces back onto the underside of the sub, because we want to see all of that detail as we watch it pass. We're going to be watching it for a while after all. Knowing that this shot is going to be cut with Pete's reactions, and that I want to extend it as long as possible for that Star Destroyer effect, I plan to shoot it in 3 passes, front, middle and rear. For the rear pass we had to throw in a little homage to Mel Brooks' Spaceballs. Just having fun, y'all. But with the light where it is, essentially top and backlit, we're not really going to see it. So I essentially recreate the same setup but with our key light behind the camera, rather than in front. Basically we just turned everything round apart from the drapes because they're the heaviest. I use flags again to reduce spill on the background. Nets are great when you want to take some of the heat off a specific area of your subject. You just place it in the beam's path. By reorientating the light, we're also now not shooting straight up at the light source, so it won't look so bright above the sub. Bearing in mind we are supposed to be deep underwater, so we don't want it to be too bright above. Once we're set, I run through my first 2 passes, keeping that move as consistent as possible. Remember, the camera move is supposed to translate as the sub moving past the camera, so it must be steady. The final shot of the sub sees it cruising off into the distance, so our stands will enter the shot, but as long as the area immediately around that sub is clear, JP can extend the murkiness to fill the frame.
What is that? It looks man-made, like an antenna or something. But from what?
So there you go, all the shots ticked off. We've got a few passes in there, a few extra ones, because why wouldn't you when you've got something like this in front of you? Hopefully a good example of how scaling up a model, what a difference that makes in terms of getting those nice close-ups and long passing shots, really makes it feel massive. Hope you enjoyed it. There are other videos as part of this series where we create a whole sequence of submarine excitement. Subscribe to the channel if you're liking what we're doing. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like, hit that notification bell if you want to know what's going on next. And if you want some extra exclusive business, check out our Patreon. All right, see you soon.
In the next episode in this series, we'll show you how we shot water elements in a fish tank to add depth and movement to our shots. And we'll take you through how we composited all of these elements and created our final sequence.